Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for everyone who is joining. We're looking forward to a great discussion this morning. Thank you for being here with us. For those who I haven't met, I'm Stephen Kahn with the LA Partnership for Early Childhood Investment. We're a public-private partnership of more than 20 foundations and public agencies here in LA County that serve children and families with young kids. Our mission is to leverage philanthropic support so that all families with young children and those working within the 0 to 5 system thrive. And we're excited to be partnering with our good friends at Unite LA for a second time on this Choose Children effort. It's work we do to raise issues related to the birth to 5 years with candidates for local office, as well as with voters and with the community. This year, we're also working closely with Pathways LA and Child Care Resource Center to amplify our work. As an organization that has not just centered equity in our work, but we work to infuse it in our giving, in our collaborations, and in our priorities. We're especially glad to be having this conversation with you all today during a month when we've all witnessed yet again another heart-wrenching example of how systemic racism continues to uphold inequity and differences in opportunity and outcomes. And that's because the work we're all doing, and I know many of you in the audience working with us, the work we're doing seeks to right those inequities from the earliest years in life for kids, as well as for families during some challenging times. Plus, we're all fortunate to have be part of collaborations that demonstrate the best of LA County and what we can and should be. I know we all want to hear from the candidates and moderators and not me, so I'm going to quickly thank a few people and run through a few of the way that today is going to go. I first want to thank our great partners at Unite LA. They do innovative work from cradle to career, but we know that they like working with us on little kids issues the best, and they're great partners. Both CCRC and Pathways LA have been terrific collaborators during the last few months working on this, working in something to be important, working in a nonpartisan way so that candidates understand the importance of 0 to 5 issues and the priorities that we all share. I want to thank our participants today, Maria Brenes and Rocio Rivas, who are running for LAUSD board seat 2, as well as Lindsey Horvath, who is running in the Board of Supervisors race for District 3, where I happen to live. And I should note, we also invited Bob Hertzberg, the other candidate for the Board of Supervisors, but he was unable to attend. Real quick, here's how this is going to work. Each candidate, will talk with them for about 25 minutes in succession so we can have in-depth conversations. We'll start with LAUSD here in just a couple minutes. And then at 11 a.m., we'll be speaking with Lindsey Horvath. Speaking with the candidates for LAUSD will be Lisa Cahill, Chief Operating Officer at Pathways LA. And then in conversation with Lindsey Horvath will be Sonia Campos Rivera at Unite LA, our Senior Vice President at Unite LA. A really important point for everybody in the audience, if you have questions for the candidates, and we certainly hope you do, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We're all familiar with that, so you just go in there and we will get those questions to the candidates. Finally, before I hand things over to Lisa, I want to reemphasize this is a nonpartisan educational forum, as Choose Children is. Our goal is to inform the candidates and voters about birth to 5 issues, their importance to healthy child development, to strong families, and to a strong economy and society. No one's involved has endorsed any of the candidates. And I want to close by saying really quickly what we all know. The birth to 5 years for families, for kids, and for those who work in the field are critical, and the issues, programs, and funding for all of them are equally important. We very much appreciate the candidates taking time today to talk with us about these issues, and for all of you for listening and being involved and doing the work that you do. I'll now turn it over to Lisa Cahill at Pathways LA to talk to our 2 LAUSD candidates. Lisa.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Steve, for that wonderful introduction and getting us all squared away this morning. I am honored to be here. I'm going to go ahead. We've got a lot to cover, so I want to make sure that we have plenty of time and I'll get started with our first introduction. Maria Brenes was born in Los Angeles as the proud daughter of immigrants from Mexico. After graduating from the University of California at Berkeley, Maria worked as a community organizer working in Oakland. She then went on to earn her master's in education at Harvard University, where she became the first Latina elected student body president of the Graduate School of Education. In 2002, Maria returned to Los Angeles and began working as a youth organizing director, advocating for educational and housing justice in the east side of Los Angeles as executive director of Inner City Struggle. She has 2 children who are in LAUSD. Welcome, Maria. It's so nice to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
To get started, we have a fairly straightforward question. Just tell us, why are you running for a seat on the Board of Education, and why members of the audience should consider voting for you?
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'm very excited to be here and having this important conversation about our youngest learners and how much is at stake for them and the future of our communities. And I have to share that I am fighting a cold that I got from my 10-year-old daughter, but just excited to be here. And I'm a longtime education children's advocate. I'm an LAUSD parent as well. And for over 20 years, I have dedicated my work to advancing educational justice, housing justice, and issues of equity as it relates to our highest need communities and schools throughout LAUSD, and in particular with a focus on the east side of LA, which is where my organization is based. It's where I live. It's where I have deep roots and where my children attend school. And this is a community that has faced great challenges related to structural racism, under-resourced conditions, and lack of opportunity. And education, from my perspective, is a public institution that can allow for great upward mobility and access for our children and for the future of our communities. And for far too long, LAUSD ignored and neglected our schools. And it was our organization working with everyday young people and families that stood up over 20 years ago and demanded higher expectations and greater investments. And it was through my leadership and strategic campaigns and the development of organizers from the community that we were able to advance change, winning new schools, LAUSD new schools, increasing access to college preparation, ending punitive school discipline, bringing more equitable resources, and resources like wellness centers so that students would have greater access to health services, which is so integral to accessing education and learning. So I am running. I love being a community organizer. I've been one since I was 17 years old. But there are such great challenges facing LAUSD at this moment. We need to push for a district that its framework is cradle to college and careers. And that's been my work over the last 20 years. And this is an opportunity to bring in new leadership that understands how to push, how to fight, how to engage the community to improve equity and opportunity. And I believe I am that right candidate for this moment.
Oh, thank you. That was really wonderful. And you touched on this a little bit, but what do you think that LAUSD's greatest strengths are as a district? And where do you hope to see the most improvement in the coming 4 years as you serve a first term?
Well, I think one of our greatest strengths is our families and our students. And in all of the years that I have worked in community organizing in the east side of Los Angeles, I hear every day the aspirations, the hopes, the goals of young people and their families, their caregivers, their parents. They all want a chance to meet their great potential, their great promise as young people. Families want schools and an educational system that sees their child, that validates them, and believes that they can meet high expectations. Many years ago, when I started the work at Inner City Struggle, we conducted a survey with thousands of high school youth and families, and the majority, their goal was college. For the majority, their goal was high skill, high paying careers. But the data showed a different story. The data showed that very few students were being prepared for college, and the majority of the students were not graduating. And so the aspirations of our families were not being met by the way that our schools were investing in our students, investing in our families. So the work I've done through Inner City Struggle and in alliance with many organizations across the city and the county is to align those expectations with the way that our schools are resourced and invested in, and the high expectations that they need to uphold. That's why we pushed for the A to G for All resolution in 2005, making the college course requirements to be eligible for a UC or a Cal State mandatory for graduation. And that trajectory starts at the earliest stages, exposing our youngest learners to high expectations, preparing them for the rigor of kindergarten, middle school, and high school so they can successfully complete the A to G requirements. We were successful in at that time getting the LAUSD board to pass the resolution. In 2015, they passed a recommitment that we engaged and advocated around. And it has made LAUSD a better district. Our staff, our educators, our education workers, I think are also one of our greatest assets as an LAUSD institution. Our educators, our education workers that do the everyday work of educating, supporting, teaching our children. And as a district, we have to make sure that they're compensated, that they have strong benefits, that they have opportunities for professional development and engagement, and that they're supported. And so I think it's a combination that where the district now has an opportunity to deepen family engagement, because so many of our families, especially with our youngest learners, have become increasingly disengaged, especially after the pandemic. So an investment in family engagement, especially with our youngest learners, our highest need families, our families with students with special needs, and investing in our workforce. That is going to be the combination we need to create the world-class educational system that I believe LAUSD can be.
That's fantastic. I'm going to actually, because you touched on our next question, I'm going to kind of roll that into our fourth question a little bit, so that I give you enough time to really address some of the other pieces, because I want to make sure that we get into some of the details. So you talked a little bit about the A through G requirements and how that is important to happen. And there are things that can happen in the first few years in kindergarten that set that up properly for a student. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your experiences with early childhood issues and that overall support that would be given to that age group. Additionally, as you know, the LAUSD is a leader in rolling out transitional kindergarten and TK, and that will be rolled out in 23 and 24 school year. Kindergartens will, all the schools will have to offer kindergarten and TK for children who turn 5 during that year. And you talked a lot about teachers, support staff, the resources that will need to be there. can you talk, in addition to your experiences with early childhood learning and how it would be strengthened for those younger learners, can you also address how will you help lead the district through this rollout of the TK and transitional kindergarten and continue to keep the district at the forefront of what you spoke about, that cradle to career district?
Thank you. So in my role as an advocate and as a parent, I have experience in early care in education with LAUSD. And in fact, Inner City Struggle was one of the founders of the Whole Child Equity Partnership, which is a statewide coalition of organizations, advocate organizers, parents, providers, advocating at the state level for equitable resources and funding that will then trickle down at the local level to support our families and our families with youngest learners, and make sure there's more resources allocated for early care in education. And one of the powerful components of our messaging of our coalition is this idea of targeted universalism, where we have a broad goal to support the whole child, support our youngest learners, 0 to 5, 0 to 8, which are critical years in the developmental stages of our children, social emotionally, academically, in their leadership, and in investing in them so that they're successful after that stage, which is so critical. The other important part about targeted universalism, excuse me, is that although there is a larger goal, embedded is an equity approach where we advocate at the state level and at the local level to make sure that the most disadvantaged groups have additional resources, additional supports and investments and focus to make sure their needs are being met. And what that looks like in terms of implementation, because at the state level, we have been advocating for an equity index. LAUSD has a student equity needs index. That was something that Inner City Struggle and myself were part of pushing for at the LAUSD level, identifying through community and academic indicators our highest needs schools, and having the district allocate local control funding formula dollars equitably to make sure we are addressing needs in a strategic, equitable manner. And it's been very successful in LAUSD, and the board has invested significantly over the last 2 years, especially post students returning from school after distance learning. So we've been advocating at the state level for the replication of the index, but I think at the local level, we can replicate that for early education, early care and education, and identify where are the deserts, where are the gaps in terms of access, where do we need to expand seats, where do we need to expand early care and education centers at the LAUSD level specifically, to prepare and provide, through the pandemic. I think one of the opportunities as advocates that we were able to identify is having the public understand how critical childcare is, how critical early education learning is, because our providers, were essential workers. They were at the front lines caring for our children so that our other essential workers could work and provide the necessary services that were so needed through the pandemic. So I think an index to identify where the needs are. And I think LAUSD will need to put forth a bond measure. That is something I would advocate for, a bond measure that specifically invests in the expansion of early education facilities, of early education seats in areas where the gaps are greatest. So in investment in our infrastructure to expand an investment to fund more seats, and that will mean an investment in our workforce, both in hiring more positions. But I think, it's an area that's underinvested in. We need to invest and adequately compensate our workforce that is taking care and teaching our youngest learners. And then I think there's other strategies that can strengthen the learning and the academic component. Wellness hubs is something the Equity Partnership has also been advocating for. Wellness centers are something that, as an inner city struggle organizer and advocate, we've been pushing for and have expanded wellness centers on the East Side. And I think a focus on our youngest learners is vital. Having screenings at the 0 to 5 stage is so important. Health screenings, supporting our parents to identify any developmental needs that may arise, any health challenges that may arise. Early intervention is so key to the success of our children before they enter kindergarten. And having the data so we are not just identifying the need, but also how we improve programs, how we improve interventions is something that I want to continue to advocate for. And through the programming lens, I think respecting the home language and exposure to multiple languages is so critical at that stage. And we have to invest in the dual language. We have to support our English learners and make sure families understand the reclassification process, which is so complicated. But if we're intervening at that stage, our students can be so much more successful. Special education and having those supports and the integration of services for our special education students at the early education stage is also critical for their success long term. I think overall, enveloping the whole family, the whole child, embracing them, recognizing their culture, validating their language, validating that they are, so powerful in the development of their child's learning. We have such an opportunity. We just have to invest more at that stage of early care and education for LAUSD.
Love that. Thank you. You touched on so many of the questions. I'm taking notes to make sure we're covering so many things. So it's really great. Thank you. There is a really engaging question from the audience. So I'm going to read it now. It asks, what are your priorities and ideas for addressing the social emotional gaps of young learners at LAUSD, especially as we move forward from the negative impacts of COVID?
That is such an important question, because the issue of a mental health crisis is impacting all of our children. The pandemic, the East Side of LA, where I do the community organizing work and advocacy work on a day-to-day basis. We saw firsthand the devastation of the pandemic on our communities. The East Side was the epicenter at one point that was devastating economically, spiritually, and our children witnessed this. Our children saw their families have to deal with, the loss of income, have to deal with housing insecurity, food insecurity, and the loss of loved ones because of the devastation of the pandemic. So we're seeing the impacts of that in the work we do in the community, the work we do with young people, with the work we do with families. And this is showing up in our classrooms, and it's showing up in our communities on a day-to-day basis. And I think the most important thing for LAUSD is to engage, to validate. And our schools are hubs for safety. Our schools are hubs for nurturing, for learning, and we have to make sure that our youngest learners are showing up, that they have access, that they have opportunity, and within the curriculum, integrating social emotional learning, integrating restorative justice practices, integrating anti-racist curriculum, as well as providing mental health supports, mental health services, and strengthening partnerships with the county, with community organizations, with the city, and ensuring that those mental health approaches are culturally relevant, that they're age appropriate, and that it's also available to our families, because the mental health challenges are an issue that is family-wide, community-wide, and we have to have a systemic approach. It has to be an ecosystem approach. LAUSD working with community partners, working with the county in order to ensure that our children are getting the services that they need, and strengthening our curriculum and providing the professional development and the additional staffing we need to ensure that social emotional learning is integrated into the curriculum at an age appropriate level, and that the students are building those self-efficacy skills before they enter kindergarten, and that they can continue to strengthen them throughout their trajectory.
Yeah, that is, that's really interesting and really leads us to, I'm getting a warning on time. So I think this will probably be one of our last questions. And you were touching on it earlier. So, you know, we've all seen really the very sad and actually reprehensible events that occurred with the LA City Council this last month. And, you know, I know many of the organizations that are here on this call today have denounced the 3 council members who were heard on the recording. You've talked a little bit about this, but I'd love to hear more about how you'll bring a perspective informed by racial justice and equity to your service on the board.
Yes, thank you for that question. I also want to echo the denouncing that, you know, I have stated from the very beginning when the audio was leaked, denouncing the racist, hateful, homophobic, anti-Indigenous remarks that were stated by our elected representatives. And Inner City Struggle, we have been very clear that, you know, leadership that is still in office must resign to allow our communities to heal from the harm and move forward, and demand representation that reflects our values of racial solidarity, of inclusivity, of equity, of equality, and of courage to always stand up and reject hateful, racist language. And we have been in the streets, marching, demonstrating, calling for resignations, and continuing to build the multiracial solidarity that is the foundation of the work of Inner City Struggle, and has been for over 20 years, because we know that in order to build an educational system that is equitable, that is inclusive, that is validating to all identities, to all languages, you know, we have to demand better. And this is a moment that our children are watching. This is a moment, a learning moment for our communities, for our children, to know that there are advocates, there is leadership that is going to stand up for them, that there is leadership that's going to be courageous. And I think more than ever in the Board of Education, we need leadership that is going to center racial justice, that is going to center equity. And that's the work I have done forever, for 20 years here in LAUSD, and for nearly 30 years since I was a young person. And we lived in a state that was very different, in a state that in 1994 had a ballot proposition that would have denied education to undocumented residents, education to undocumented children, but targeted everyone that was of immigrant descent, everyone that was a person of color, everyone that was seen as an other. And that was a moment in California where the generation that I'm a part of stood up, demonstrated, and said, we're going to reclaim California for what it can be and what it needs to be and what it should be, a state for all. And that is the LAUSD leadership that we need to center our highest need communities, our highest need children, regardless of zip code, regardless of skin color, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of gender identity, regardless of ability. You will have access to a quality education in your neighborhood. We are going to invest in you. We're going to believe in you. We will not criminalize you. Your language, your culture, your history, that of your family will be reflected in the curriculum. And you will be validated. You will be seen from cradle to college and beyond. And we need to have a board that makes decisions based on those values. And I have called out LAUSD when it hasn't, when it denied students access to A to G, when it criminalized students for willful defiance. Instead of implementing restorative justice, students were over suspended and over expelled. I called out LAUSD when it was underfunding schools with greater needs. And so if elected, I will continue to push for racial justice at all levels of stages of a child's educational experience. And from my perspective, that begins at infancy and goes all the way to senior year and beyond. And so thank you to all the advocates, the providers, the educators on this call, because we need collaboration and coalition more than ever in this moment. That's the work I've done, and that's the work I'll continue to do. Thank you so much.
Oh, that is a perfect summation, and that was encompassed my last question. So I think we will leave it there, and thank you so much for giving us a great overview of your work. And thank you so much for being here today. So, yes. So next, I'm going to introduce our second candidate, Dr. Rocio Rivas. Immigrated to the United States from Mexico at the age of 2. She attended LAUSD schools and graduated from Reseda High School. She holds a Bachelor of Arts from the University of California at Berkeley in Political Science and Developmental Studies, with a minor in African American Studies. She went on to earn a PhD from Columbia University in Comparative and International Education, with a political sociology emphasis and geographical focus in the United States and Latin America. Since 2019, Dr. Rivas has worked as policy deputy for the LAUSD School Board member Jackie Goldberg. She is also the mother of a current LAUSD student. Welcome. It's so nice to have you here this morning. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start with just that basic forward question. Why are you running for a seat on the LA Board of Education, and why should members of our audience vote for you?
Well, good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you and have an opportunity to introduce myself. So I am Rocio Rivas. I'm an immigrant. I came here when I was 2.5 years old from Mexico, and I was raised by 2 working hard class parents, and they worked hard for my brother and I. And what I vividly remember from my childhood, growing up throughout my educational life, was our public schools. I vividly remember our classrooms and our teachers, all the teachers throughout kindergarten until I graduated. I remember them. And so for me, public education was an opportunity to grow cognitively. I was a very inquisitive child. And so needless to say, I graduated from UCEDA with honors. I went to UC Berkeley, but it was at UC Berkeley that I fell in love with early education. I had an opportunity to be a teaching assistant at a bilingual school in Berkeley. And through my experience with these wonderful children, learning English and Spanish together, different ethnicities, this is where I had this vision of dedicating my life to public education, but in a way that we can create an anti-racist, compassionate, restorative, culturally relevant society. And I knew that it had to be through our public schools, through our classrooms. And so needless to say, I went on to Teachers College. And it is here that I really immersed myself in all that is education, everything from early education all the way to adult education. And so I learned alongside teachers, strategies, their own experiences in the classrooms. I also was in the classroom with administrators, and they were also relaying to me and in our conversations and in our activities and readings in our classrooms, their experiences as well. And so I was fascinated by education, the educational arena, everything from management and to our classrooms. And so I delved and during my doctorate degree in comparative and international education, I had an opportunity to really have the professional experience of policy analysis, policy making. I became a researcher. I was part of educational research projects internationally in the Republic of Georgia and Bolivia. I had an opportunity to go to Argentina and Chile because I wanted to know all the educational systems worldwide and understand how we can learn from others. And that is what comparative and international education is learning about different education systems, policies, the transfer and borrowing of educational policies. I wanted to know why some policies work and why some don't. And so I really learned about educational reform. And I delved into philosophy from Dewey to Vygotsky. And so I understand what happens inside the classrooms, having been a researcher, and I understand how to change institutions, having understanding how to do it through policymaking and changing policies. And that is the way that we change public institutions. And so I'm running because I want to use my doctorate to the fullest degree. So I'm an immigrant child that came here and now I have a doctorate. And I want to make sure that these abilities and my knowledge is being put to use in all our public schools, in the district. And I want to make sure I'm there helping our classroom teachers with curricular development. I also want to be an assistant to our administrators, helping them understand how to be educational leaders, not helping them, because they already have those skills. I want to be the collaborator. I want to make sure that we're helping their working conditions, because I know that it takes a village to really address the needs of our children, all the way from parenting workshops and all the way to adult education, where we can provide our parents with parenting classes. And so when I became a mom, I really delved into providing the cognitive development of my son. And so I learned about every single milestone in his development. And I really became a big advocate of conscious parenting, of being mindful parent, where we're addressing the needs of our child. And we're also being mindful of how we are speaking and interacting with our child. And this is what I bring. I bring an understanding of conscious parenting, and I bring an understanding of adult education, but most of all, I bring the understanding and knowledge and experience working directly with board member Jackie Goldberg as her research and policy deputy. And my policy focus was early education. So I worked closely with our early education teachers, educators, and administrators at the district. And so I bring this deep knowledge to make sure that the district is providing all the spaces for all of our children, because research, as you all know, does indicate that the earliest we can address the needs of cognitive needs of our child, then they will be successful, lifelong successful students and adults. So thank you.
That's great. That's a wonderful introduction. Thank you for all of that. You touched on a couple of our next questions, so I think I'm going to try to put them together. So you talked about your experience with ECE and in the classroom. Can you talk a little bit about what you see as the district's greatest strengths, which and then what improvements you would be looking to make in your first term? And additionally, just talking about that in terms of how that would be supportive of ECE as well as young children and their family during this critical time of their lives.
That is a very important question for me because, as I mentioned, early childhood education policy and that whole area within the district was within my purview with working with Jackie Goldberg. So I assisted her and also advised her and how to advocate and bring about resolutions for early education. So I was really working on that. And so what the district is really doing beautifully, and I've had the opportunity to work with Dr. Togawa, who is the head of the early education department, and they're really investing in within all of our early centers. But not only that, but they're making sure that all of the state programs are available to all of our parents, everything from CalSafe to ETK to, as I mentioned, early education centers, Head Start as well, and that they advocate for our children from the state level. Dr. Togawa was a member of the Governor Newsom's committee on early education. And so I know we have those professionals and they're dedicated to our children. And the other thing that the district is really doing is expanding outdoor learning spaces. I had the opportunity to see from the before construction and after of Monte Vista Early Education Center in Highland Park. I saw the before when it was just a playground and a little grass area and a little sand, it didn't have much color. And then I was there when it was all torn down and we were digging in for doing the first dig. And then now it is full of greenery. It has garden beds, it has, tactile, areas, and it's green. We have butterflies, there's murals. I just want to say it brought tears to my eyes seeing the ribbon cutting event, and then also seeing the children, once it was available, the children were playing, the principal, asked me to come and just see all the wonderful activities. And that is what the district is doing, is opening the joy of education, but in our early education centers and also our primary centers. The district has really opened a lot of primary centers where they're focused on kindergarten and first grade. And as you know, as I mentioned, those are the critical years to make sure they have those numeracy and communication skills. So when they go on to elementary school, and they're making sure that those centers also have those the outdoor learning spaces. So this is what the district is doing. They know that we need to address the early education. However, what we need to do is make sure we're advocating at the state level for more resources. We need more budget for our early education centers. I've been speaking to principals, and the biggest thing that they let me know is that they feel as the stepchildren of education, public education, because the focus is always K through 12. They never focus on the smallest of children. And so they have a very limited budget. And what I'm going to do as board member, hopefully, if I win, is advocate at the state level that we need to double, if not triple, that budget for our early education, all of our early childhood education centers. And also we need to raise the wages for those teachers. They're there 24/7. They don't get a break. They're because we have working class parents, right, that really depend on that childcare. And also the district needs to do more in providing assistance to the independent childcare workers. They need professional development. They also need some budget and some grants from the state. So it's from the moment that the child is born, we need to make sure we're accessing and connecting to those parents. So we give them parenting workshops and our adult classrooms. And also that we're also reaching out to the parents who are going to enroll in our schools. So the district has wonderful programs, it's doing the investments, but what we need to do as a state level is bring more of that money to our schools and for our little ones. And also the other thing I want to address before we leave, school infrastructure. A lot of our schools are not fit for the smallest of babies. I've been going to our schools and they're so small, and those benches, they're so high, they have to like actually need a bench, a step stool to get on the bench. And I see their little legs dangling, and I speak to principals and they're really afraid that they're going to fall. And so we need investments in changing the infrastructure, making sure we have adequate equipment and chairs and tables, because if we're going to open spaces for our littlest of children, then we need to make sure that our schools have the adequate furniture, equipment for them as well. And we need to provide more PDs, professional development to our teachers, particularly professional development that it helps them integrate trauma-informed strategies, because a lot of our children do come from trauma families with trauma, and we want to make sure that we're providing our professional development and curriculum development so that the teachers know how to embed those strategies in their activities and within the classrooms to also address that. There's so much, but that is for now what I feel immediately needs to be done.
Yes, thank you. There is so much to do. That is true. And that's really gives a very comprehensive view of really what our next few questions were. We do have a question from the audience that kind of takes us to our next thing here, and that is, how would you promote increased access to TK for children of color, those living in poverty, and dual language learners, while not taking away from the existing robust preschool system that's in place by LAUSD?
Yes, that is an important question, because of all of our families are really struggling with having that access. And so what I want to do is really work with all at every single level, intergovernmental level, and really understanding what the needs of each of the communities. And within Board District 2, the communities are very, very diverse. I mean, we have families in Los Feliz who are have high income, and then we have families in El Sereno, City Terrace, East LA, Chinatown, parts of downtown as well, that are from low income and communities that are very underserved. And there are a lot of environmental injustices. And so we really need to understand those communities and what the needs are from every single level and income level, and then have those targeted supports. For instance, as I mentioned, we have a lot of our low-income trauma, we have a lot of violence, we have, unfortunately, they've been neglected and underserved, particularly in the Westlake Pico Union. As I've been canvassing our communities, I see that neglect. And I'm going to work with our city council members and making sure that we have opening our parks and recs as well, and that we're offering these state programs for our parents and our children, and that we're opening those spaces, and that we're investing in our parks, and that we're connecting that to the district, to daycare centers. So there's that interconnection between that, with our city services, with district services, and also county services. So we have to interconnect that so that we're focusing and connecting directly with those families. I had an opportunity to, right before school opened, to go to the families with students with high chronic absenteeism, and really knocking on their door and letting them know, hey, we're here for you. We want to connect. What do you need? You matter to us, and we want to make sure you have those services. The same thing we have to do in all of our communities. And we have that data. We have the census data where we can know which are the families that are with the lowest income that have the highest need. And we have to target that. And the district has to be an advocate for that as well, and be part of that advocacy and that proactiveness. So that's what we have to do. We have to be proactive from the moment that our child is born, because eventually that child is going to come to LAUSD. And we want to make sure that they are equipped with all of that. And that's why I'm a strong advocate for adult education. I was a community representative as one of my son's schools. And one of the responsibilities of a community rep is to provide workshops, parent workshops. And so what I did is, in something I want to continue doing as a board member, is providing workshops, conscious parenting workshops. I did one on cognitive growth mindset by Carol Dweck, and applied it to our children and how parents can create those spaces at home. So that's what we have to do, is provide workshops for our parents and working at all levels of government to make sure we have those resources and making those direct knocks to the families to let them know that we're here, we have, these are how we can connect you to the services, and you matter to us.
Great. And that kind of gets into yet another question from the audience, and that is, what does whole child, whole family mean to you? And what supports do we need to provide our families to meet their greatest potential?
The whole child, holistic services, it encompasses social, emotional, mental health, emotional intelligence, but it has to be part of the family structure. So the wholeness, the child is part of this wonderful village, right? From the parents, the elders, their cousins, their uncles, so we have this whole family structure. So the entire family structure has to be part of that nurturing of the children. So if we can provide that, that is what that means. So when we have a school, a community school, hopefully I'm an advocate of a community schools model, and that essentially what it does is converts our schools as community resource centers. And then so that every part of that family member has access to that school, right? So if mental health is something that the family is in need of services or a practitioner, then they know that they can go to a wellness center or also a community rep who has a parent center with all of these resources. And then they know, hey, this is what I need. For instance, I had a parent who lost her daughter. She was a grandmother, and she lost her daughter. And now she has to raise her 2 grandchildren. And she was grieving. And she came to me and she said, I don't know what to do. I'm grieving and I don't know how to raise my 2 grandchildren because I still miss my daughter. And what I had to do is make sure I had connections at the LA County Department of Health and Mental Health, and I gave him his number. I did some research and I sat with her and I said, this is what you need. I want that for our schools. If she would be able to have someone in her grandchild's school that she can open up and say, this is what I'm going through. And my grandchildren are also going through grieving. How can you help me? Right? And connecting that's whole child. So our schools have to be the centers of the whole child, social, emotional, mental health. And the other thing that I really want to make sure our schools become are green schools. So research indicates that when we transforms our schools into green schools, when we have trees, when we have gardens, then we're creating a space of healing, where our children come more motivated and joy of coming to school because they have those outdoor spaces, they have those spaces where they can decompress. And so our teachers and our staff members have that wonderful environment around them, which is green. And so that is what the whole child means. And that their schools are also fully staffed so that we have nurses and that we have librarians who provide that nurturing of the whole child. And we have school psychiatrists that can address those issues. And if we can also reduce the caseloads of all of our staff members so they can provide individualized attention, like small classrooms, then we can really address the whole needs of the child. And the district has a data system. So we also need to integrate our data system. So there's a whole child data system that the district has invested in. And basically what this is this is also one thing we need to integrate with our early education centers, is integrating the data from early ed into elementary. So when the teacher is looking at the new sets of students that are coming in, they can see all of the notes from previous teachers and know the needs. Is this a special needs student? Will I need a supervising aid? Will I need a special aid? So integrating the systems also will inform the staff and the school how to provide those whole child services and create that school into a community resource center.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you. And I think we're right at our last few minutes, but we have so many good audience questions. So this will be a nice one, I think, to wrap up with. What should a high quality early learning program look like for LAUSD? And what programmatic elements should a quality program have?
Wonderful question. Yes. Everything starts from what's inside the classroom, the environment, the culture. So basically, we need to have teachers that are paid livable wages, that we're making sure that they have the wages they have a roof over their head, that we're providing them with the resources they need as well. Because when they come to our classrooms and teach our children, they're stress-free, and they can focus on our children, and they know that the district cares for them and the city cares for them because they have those wages. So that's what we have to do. We have to provide quality professional development. And it also takes collaboration, public and private collaboration within the city. So we need to access those community resources and bring them into the schools, creating those partnerships, because we have a lot of nonprofits and organizations that have those resources, that have the grants. They just don't have access to our schools, and they do not have access to our children. And that's what we have to open up the district and making sure that we can create those partnerships and making sure that those contracts or those MOUs, a memorandum of understanding, are feasible, that we can connect so that directly we can get that quality resource and partnerships into our schools. We also have to make sure that we bring in the arts. I'm a big proponent of the arts. My child went to a visual and arts program. He's a great artist. And I saw that when he was a child, because I was paying attention to his cognitive development. I was paying attention to drawing. I had him draw. I would always have art, because art opens that part of the brain, right? We have the rational and the creative, and we can make sure that in our classrooms, we're melding both. We're using the logical and we're using the creative. So we need to infuse our classrooms with arts education, and we need to provide that professional development. But we also need to make sure that our arts educators are also provided with their wages, and that they're not also being sent to different schools, that they're there at least at one school providing arts for every single level. So that's what we need. We need quality teachers. We need to pay them. We need to make sure that that we have the budgets and that we have all the supplies so that parents don't have to, buy for our schools. That is the responsibility of the district. That is the responsibility of the state, that our schools have the supplies, that our parents don't. If the parents want to, that's great, but they should not have to be obligated, or they should not have to say or feel that, or that the school has to, ask the parents or the community. It's wonderful if they do, but they're asked to be there already. And we need to infuse it with enrichment programs and activities, and also provide those workshops for our parents so they can also create their homes into that connection of the classroom. So they making sure that they're having those conversations, that they're reading books. I don't know if you can see the books behind me, but in my house, it's all about books. My child, when he was able to hold his head up, he had a book in his hand, and I was opening books. And I love that my son loves to read, and he has books, and he's reading right now. He's in 7th grade, and he's reading at 9th grade level. And that's what we need to do. And that's what I started at birth, and I started at early education, and I started with the arts, and I started with great teachers. And that's how we create quality education for all our youngest of learners.
That is really wonderful. And I think that brings us right at our time. I'm looking to see if I'm getting any hints on our timing here. Do you have one last thing? Last words? Somebody's telling me. Any just last words that you have?
Well, I'm very grateful for this. This is one of my favorite subjects. As a mom, I really dedicated myself to my son, and I know what every parent wants for their child. They want the best. They want the best education. They want the best teachers. They want the best curriculum. And that's what I want for every single child in Los Angeles. From the moment they are born, I want them to have those opportunities. And when they're born, that means their parents have to have those opportunities. They have to have those jobs, and they have to have those spaces where they can leave their child and know that they're going to be taken care of, and that that daycare center or that early education center or that Head Start center has the quality teachers and necessary environment and supplies that they need. And we also, so that's where I come from. I come from a parent who has been dedicated, and also as a doctor, a person with a mom with a doctorate, a PhD. I'm also a political activist. I'm a delegate with our California Democratic Party, because I want to make change. I want our public institutions to do better, because they must do better. Our communities are suffering, particularly after the pandemic. Our communities need so much. And this is what I'm here, because I want to impart all of my knowledge, all of my policy experience, and my dedication and working for Jackie Goldberg in the past 3.5 years. I know that the district is the district that cares, because I have been speaking to all of the administrators and within the central office in our schools. I go to our classrooms and I see that love that our teachers bring all the way from our early education centers to our adult education centers. And then if we want a city to really thrive economically, yes, we need to invest all the way from when they're born and also when they leave us, because education is lifelong, and we need to provide that education for a professional or independent daycare workers, so they also have that. So we have to be a responsible society, and we are a responsible society when we have responsible and just public institutions, and it starts with our public schools. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Great. Thank you so much for being here today. It's wonderful talking with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you, Maria and Rocio. Really appreciated both of their enthusiasm, their knowledge, their interest. We all know that we need that kind of dedicated public servants in our local elected office. So hope everybody enjoyed that, appreciated it, and learned a little something. I'm now really happy that I'm going to be able to pass things over to somebody who I consider a very good friend, and she and I have been working on early childhood issues for longer than either one of us would like to admit at this point. But Sonia Campos Rivera at Unite LA, please, the virtual floor is yours, Sonia.
Thank you so much, friend. Appreciate the invitation. And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm excited to introduce our next speaker. Just a quick background on our next speaker. It's Council Member Lindsey Horvath, who has served on the West Hollywood City Council since 2015, including as mayor in 2020 and 2021. She had previously served on the council from 2009 to 2011. In addition to her role on the council, Horvath has served on a number of government bodies, including as president of the California Contract Cities Association, board member for California Cities, formerly known as the League of California Cities, board member for the National League of Cities, and president of Women's Municipal Government for the National League of Cities. She also served as the Transportation Commissioner from 2011 to 2015. Horvath works as an entertainment advertising executive and graduate cum laude with a BA in political science and gender studies from the University of Notre Dame. Welcome, and I believe you might be on. We'll give her a hello there.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us, Councilwoman. How are you today?
I'm doing okay. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We're thrilled to have you and to have a couple of minutes to chat. We only have about 30 or so minutes, so we'll go ahead and jump right in. As you know, I just said a little bit about your background, but would love it if maybe you can do a 1-minute intro of yourself, and then we can go ahead and jump into the questions.
Sure, absolutely. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. More importantly, I appreciate the work that you all do each and every day to make sure that we are uplifting, supporting, and empowering our next generation in Los Angeles County and beyond. I'm incredibly grateful for your work. And as someone who supported a dear friend who has recently fostered several children, as a friend of someone who works in our CASA through the CASA system and fostering and working with foster youth, someone who's been witness and supportive of folks who are directly involved in this work. I know that you face innumerable challenges, and many of which I hope we get to discuss here today. But the lived experience of moving through the system of LA County and making sure that the services actually meet people where they are in community is something that drove me to run for this seat and to be of service generally. I come from local government. I've spent about 15 years as a city official and in regional, state, and national levels of leadership, but always focused on local issues and local leadership, because this is the place that can transform people's lives. It is the place where we need to bridge gaps in service to make that transformational impact. And that is the unique experience I bring to this role. And I'm very excited for the discussion that we'll have here today.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And yes, on behalf of the Partnership for Early Childhood Investment, Child Care Resource Center, Pathways LA, and Unite LA, who I represent, we're thrilled to have you join us to just really have a dialogue about the importance of early care and education. We've known that for many years, pre-pandemic, this was a very important topic that oftentimes got neglected and was oftentimes the first item on the chopping block during recessions. Mm-hmm. The pandemic, I think, highlighted the importance of investing in childcare. We learned that in order for our economy to operate and sustain itself, we really need to support our providers and the parents so that they can be part of the workforce. The way many of our partners on this call, which by the way include business, philanthropic, education and advocacy leaders, we had about 150 registered and are probably here listening to us today. It's very clear that now as we think about government priorities from all levels of government, that it is critical for us to include early care and education, childcare into those priorities. It's no longer a family issue, it's a societal issue, and I think the pandemic just really elevated that. So again, excited to have you join us, and we do have a couple of questions. And what I recommend, council member, is maybe a 2 to 3 minute response from you, just so we can try to get through as many as possible. I think we have about 11 and we'll do the best we can. So, okay. So the first question is, tell us why you are running for a seat on the Board of Supervisors and why members of our audience should vote for you.
Well, I appreciate, again, that we are having this conversation. I'm running for LA County Supervisor because I saw as mayor during COVID, as president of California Contract Cities Association, during this time of crisis, where the county met the moment of crisis, where it didn't, where it fell short. And I've seen throughout my tenure in local government, even before I was a city official, the impact that LA County can make in our daily lives if we're doing government right. And it is that local experience, making sure that we're bridging the gap in services between the county and our local neighborhoods and our cities, making sure that the social safety net that is intended to be provided by the county actually meets us where we are in our communities. Homelessness and housing have been top of mind no matter where I've gone in the district or the county, quite frankly. And my community has had about an 80% success rate getting people off the streets and into housing services or both. And I'm happy to share a bit more about that. But I think our program, about 4 years ago, we had a conversation with representatives from the county about our program. And in short, we convened the conversation to say, what aren't we doing? Because we just saw things getting worse, not better, despite all our efforts. And what we heard from the county is that they weren't doing what we were doing. They said, you're doing everything right. We just need to get up to where you are. And here we are 4 years later, and they're still not there. So I want to bring my experience, my ability to build coalitions, my ability to empower social service providers who know how to solve the issues on the ground, and bring that experience into LA County so we can actually start solving some some of these problems, restore trust in public government, that our resources are being used wisely, that we're actually meeting people who need the services the most, that we're fighting to protect our environment, to keep people safe, all of those things as well. But especially making sure that our working families who are working so hard, and especially we've seen during this time of crisis how the childcare responsibilities have fallen on women in the absence of other services during the time of COVID. Making sure that we are aware of that disproportionate impact, that we're stepping up, especially to help families and communities of color, and that we are providing services and investing in an equitable way to make sure that we're making the right kind of impact where there is greatest need.
Thank you very much. I'll move on to the second question. LA County has more 0 to 5-year-olds than the population of many US states. Can you tell us about your experience with early childhood issues or programs designed to support families with young children? And how would you see the county's role in strengthening supports during the most critical time of life?
So from the political side, I worked in 2012 when President Obama was running for re-election. We learned that delegates, I know our representative who just spoke earlier was talking about being a delegate to the party. One of the delegates to the party in California had a young child, and she applied to the party to get a delegate pass so she could have her child with her on the floor. And the party told her that she couldn't bring her child with her, that she didn't have access for her child. They didn't have a pass for her. Now, in this very political context, we heard the Democratic Party talking a very good game about supporting working families, about providing these services and investing in and uplifting women and families. And yet we couldn't empower our own leaders by having access and representation. The party didn't provide childcare services on site, didn't even provide nursing facilities for nursing mothers. And yet we were supposed to be the party that actually advances policies to make a difference. So I worked with Gloria Steinem and presidents like I was at the time of the National Organization for Women throughout the country to bring policy change to the party. But also it awakened me that even the people who say that they're most checked into these issues are really not aware of the disproportionate impact, especially women, but parents of young children face when they're trying to be involved civically, to make a difference in their communities, and to get what they need out of the services and support that is supposed to be intended through all of these programs. As I mentioned earlier, I've supported a friend who's now fostered 3 children through LA County Services, and I've seen where she has been successful, the kinds of programs that have helped her succeed in her job, especially through being able to provide childcare. She works in the city of Los Angeles, and so between the county and her employer, there are a lot of programs that she was able to avail herself of to help make sure that she could take care of her children. But I also saw the difficulties that families face in the court system, and making sure that she has the ability to navigate a lot of the systems because she works inside government. But for families who don't know how to navigate a bureaucracy, who might not speak the language, who might not understand how government works to begin with, accessing these programs can be incredibly challenging. And especially during COVID, where everything was done virtually, it made everything that much harder. I've seen through programs like First 5 LA, which have programs co-located in West Hollywood Elementary here in my own community, the important role that those programs have played for children in our community, and the ways that they've helped to support and provide additional programming for students of parents who need that additional support, and the enrichment that can be provided to our students when they have those activities and programs. I've seen through a variety of different programs what is working, but I've heard even more where the challenges have come in, and often parents are only accessing county services after they've run into trouble or because they've been made to be the problem, as opposed to proactive outreach from the county to help our families succeed. And I don't want to see families feeling like they're getting themselves into trouble in order to get the services that they need. We should be helping people and empowering people to come and get the services that LA County provides.
Thank you so much for that response. And in prepping for this event, I did read some of your background, and you've just done an amazing job at bringing either your community together and just with innovative solutions. The county's so large. It's, one of it's the nation's most populous county. And you touched on it already, but I wonder if you can expand on, with the county being so large and having so many agencies that touch children and families, we've already seen some improvement of breaking those silos and more engagement between, I guess I should call them interagency. Can you speak a little bit more to that? How would you, if elected, how would you encourage agencies that work with children and families to work together so that we can be more creative with our resources, be more effective and efficient?
Yes, I think that's a very key point, de-siloing information. So we are working across disciplines and intersectionally across the services that the county provides is incredibly important. A couple of examples that I've seen that in the county that are successful, in North Hills, there's a community health clinic that is co-located on an LAUSD campus. So parents are able to get services right in their own community when they're dropping their kids off from school or picking them up. Students are able to access those healthcare services while they're in school. When they apply for services, let's say somebody goes to get a dental appointment at that community health clinic, all of the paperwork that they fill out, the folks there take that paperwork and see if there are other county programs for which they qualify. And so making sure that we're centering the people who are receiving the services rather than asking people to navigate the Hall of Administration or the very dense bureaucracy that exists inside LA County, I think is incredibly important. And so taking that model of centering the person who is being served in the way we provide services is important. From a policy standpoint, and I guess a process standpoint, I think another successful recent example of a cross-jurisdictional work is through the Alternatives to Incarceration plan that is now housed under the county CEO's office. So it brings together folks from a variety of different departments to address concerns in our criminal justice system, including the programs that are supposed to support our youth who are often going to schools, and the criminal justice system is scooping them up and recidivating them through the system rather than providing the supportive services, programs, and care that young people need to survive to keep them out of that system. And so I'm very excited that LA County voters overwhelmingly supported Measure J to make sure those programs are funded. And I'm excited to see the ATI plan actually housed under the county CEO, so there is more flexibility to work across departments. And I think that starting with pilot projects on some of the issues so we can work out how departments can work cross-jurisdictionally and then expand is something that I have experience doing in my own city, and I'm prepared to bring to my experience in the county. And also, most importantly, listening to those with lived experience, both as service providers and those who are receiving the services, to help inform how we make changes is going to really guide how we help to structure LA County so it's providing services accordingly.
Thank you so much, Council Member. Next question. A poll from earlier this year, more than 800 likely LA County voters found that 80% would support a candidate who pledges to ensure all families have equal access to preschool, and 84% would support a candidate who will prioritize more health, nutrition, and social services for young children. What steps would you take as supervisor to address both of these needs?
So expanding existing programs is important, but also making sure that we're investing in staffing. So we have fewer students or fewer young people assigned to their teachers, to those who are administering these programs, so they get that one-to-one, hopefully, care, I think is very important. In my own community, we've co-located a preschool in one of our parks, so we're able to access public programs and services in our own community to help benefit the preschool. And I think expanding preschools in that way to make sure that they're rooted in community, that they're supported by surrounding community services, that they are accessible to community members, and making sure that families actually know what services are available to them. I learned during COVID that a lot of times families just didn't know what services existed or what was available. And so they kind of took matters into their own hands, as many resourceful people are able to do. But for those who were working on the front lines, they didn't have those options necessarily. And so they were really reliant on the county to make sure that they had supportive services for their children and to take care of their families. So making sure that we are working with families who are able to have those services in their own homes. I've done some site visits to to facilities that provide those services where families, a designated family welcomes young people into their home. And it's a place where families can drop off or pick up on their way from work, not just in their own communities, and making sure that we expand the availability of those kinds of services. The site I visited actually provided 24-hour care. And so making sure that we have more services like that for folks who are in non-traditional and frontline jobs to make sure those services do exist for families around the clock. But also making sure that we're partnering with community services and providers. I know that right now, the LA LGBT Center, for example, is working with some of our hospitality groups to invest in food programs for some of the clients that they serve. And so getting innovative and creative and outreaching to develop even public-private partnerships to help support some of these programs, I think is another way that we can further invest in the resources that already exist and pair people and programs that already exist, so that way they're able to provide a bigger impact.
Thank you, Council Member. So bear with me, this is a long setup for the next question, but it's important. So as the pandemic proved, early childhood workers are essential workers, but they face complex challenges. Nearly 49% of ECU workers in the county come from households designated as low income, and 57 are rent burdened. More than half, and these are workers who largely are immigrant women of color, are on at least one form of public assistance. How can the county better support these workers, providing higher wages, more stable career paths, as well as more supports for those who own and run childcare programs in sustainable ways that we can rely on?
Yeah, that's a very important question. There's a lot in there. We absolutely have to invest in more affordable housing options and also protect people in the housing that they're in that hopefully they can afford. And I've done that. I'm a renter myself, so I know the high impact of the rent burdened in throughout LA County, and those of us who are worried about how we can sustain this rising cost and the affordability crisis that we're facing. So making sure that we have assistance programs for those who are renting. We had a program even before COVID in my community to help people stay in the housing that they're already in, but for one missed paycheck would be able to stay in that housing. And so we have a program that allows people to apply up to $1,000 per month to have additional assistance to keep them in their housing. And we know that also helps us to address the homelessness crisis that we're facing and keeps people and families stable in housing that they're already in. We have to continue to expand the availability of affordable housing. I support inclusionary housing policies that mandate that housing that is developed, that a significant percentage are dedicated to moderate, low, and very low income people who need that housing resource directly in their own communities. And I support first right of return policies that make sure that when these services and resources are provided, that they actually serve the people they're intended, so we don't see gentrification displace people from the community as these services are added to communities. We absolutely must increase wages. I have been very much at the forefront of advancing the minimum wage increase in my own community to what is now the highest. We're on track to be the highest in the country. And by making sure that people who are in these jobs not only have wages that value their work, but also that there are protections in their workplace that keep them safe in their workplace. Because we know, again, during COVID, family members who are working on the front lines not only put themselves at risk, but their families at risk when they came home working in a workplace that might then expose their families and their children to COVID. So we have to make sure that we are thinking about workers and those those who are providing care and also provide them care. We saw that in frontline roles where people are providing health care, in particular, that they often were burning. We're now hearing stories of burnout and people leaving the industry altogether. So making sure that we're supporting workers in these different industries and that we're also providing them with care as they're providing care for others is another place where the county needs to increase investment. And we need to also expand the workforce by connecting programs, especially to communities that are underrepresented in these programs. So when people are receiving services, whether it's mental health care services or you name it, that the people who are providing those services look like them, have shared lived experience with them. And so they are services that people can trust, provided by people who are like them. And by expanding these programs, we will also invest in the future pipeline of the workforce, which I think is incredibly important.
Thank you, Council Member, which is a good segue to one of the questions that has come up from our audience. We've all seen the incredibly sad events that occurred within City Council this month. I know many of the organizations represented in our audience have denounced the 3 council members heard on the recording. How will you bring a perspective informed by racial justice and equity to your service on the board?
Yeah, I think it's an issue that's top of mind for everyone, not only because, I mean, we saw that happen with the 3 council members in Los Angeles. We heard remarks from the San Francisco mayor recently. We've heard anti-Semitic attacks from very high profile celebrities. I mean, it feels like the hatred, discrimination is coming at us from all sides. Sorry, I guess my dog wanted to chime in on that too. And
your doggy has an opinion, and that's okay.
so making sure that we are actively rooting out hatred, racism, bigotry of all kinds is incredibly important. We need to uplift the voices that are building coalitions across racial divides, and making sure that community is working together. We have to make sure that the leadership in LA County looks like the diversity of LA County. And so I intend to hire diversely within my own office and support increased diversity throughout the county departments, making sure that we're uplifting voices in community and that community services are leading the charge. So that way the people who are looking to help solve our problems are the ones who are already rooted in community. I'm so sorry. And that we're making sure that we're meeting people where they are with these services, rather than sort of a top-down approach or an I know it all. You know, when this news broke, I didn't want to be sort of the white West Side person who kind of chimed in with my opinion to start shaming people. Instead, I took the time to listen to how this was impacting communities so I could offer informed action steps, including expanding our representation on the County Board of Supervisors, having independent redistricting processes, having an investigation from the State Attorney General into what happened in that particular instance. We have to use the tools that we have available, but most importantly, we need to listen to each other. Right now, there's a lot of crosstalk, a lot of frustration, a lot of disappointment where government is failing people. And we've now seen in front of us some of the worst fears that people have about government realized when people hold power, what they do behind closed doors. And so making sure that we make government more transparent, we bring decisions more out into the public and are holding ourselves accountable to the goals that we say are stated in terms of how we intend to lead, I think is also another important way to do that.
Yes, thank you so much for that. So we're at time. So we have one final question before we wrap it up. What's the one thing you want our audience to remember from this conversation?
Well, I thank you for the questions and the time. And I would say that the thing I want you to remember most is that I build coalitions and that I welcome lived experience and expertise to help inform how I make policy. While I am coming from local government experience with more than 15 years experience, I know that I don't know everything, and I'm not running to be anyone's savior. I'm running to help be a partner and an ally in the work that we do. Your lived experience, your leadership helping to realize the goals of all of the programs that the county provides is what we need more more of in terms of how, in terms of informing how we're making policy. And so I'm prepared to be your partner, your ally, and to make sure that the goals that you have in realizing a better Los Angeles County are actually manifest in our communities, that we are working in partnership and collaboration, that I will always have an open door, and that your leadership and your experience is what's going to inform how I make decisions going forward as your next supervisor.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, council member. It was a true pleasure hanging out with you for a bit and getting to know you a little bit better. And thank you for sharing your ideas and your commitments, if elected, to the district with our audience. It was a true pleasure and look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Same.
Yeah, thank you. So I believe at this point, we are going to wait for my colleague, Steve, to take us on to our next part of the program. Steve, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, and I'm going to hand it right back to you, Sonia. So
Okay.
as everybody knows, in this world that we live in, Sonia has been doing a great job talking with the councilwoman while we've been texting her like crazy that she's been smart enough to ignore our texts. But we do have a representative from Bob Hertzberg's campaign that will be coming on here. And there he is, JP Hanna, I believe. So Sonia, I think we're going to give him an opportunity to just talk a little bit about the senator's 0 to 5 priorities, and maybe you can pepper him with a couple of questions.
Hello, John. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for representing Mr. Hertzberg in this conversation. So it's
I'll do my best.
Thank you for joining us, and that's totally fine. Appreciate your time. So tell us a little bit more. Of the senator's interest and why he's running for a seat on the Board of Supervisors, and why members of our audience should vote for him.
So I think a really big point about the senator is that, in his tenure in the state legislature, both as Speaker of the House and Majority Leader in the Senate, he's led significant efforts to improve many aspects of California life. In particular, I wanted to talk about childcare and early childhood education. As Majority Leader, he's a deal maker, and he's worked with a lot of his colleagues to make significant increase in investments in childcare. And that expands into expanding access and enrollment and increasing efficiencies. Things like, there's a bill to allow for to make it easier for low-income families to not only access early child care services, but also stay in them. So 24-month continuous services without having to recertify. These little things that just make it easier. They've significantly expanded universal TK. They've lowered the student-teacher ratios. And so his role in the Senate and in the Assembly was, passing these laws. But where it comes to the county is sort of the storefront arm of the legislature. And the county is the one that implements these laws. And I think that, while the county is doing a good job, it can always do better. And there's a lot of room for improvement, particularly in Los Angeles County. An important bill that was actually recently passed and signed by the governor, AB 321. This is something I think is uniquely benefits LA County, and it speaks to how we need to tailor our services to early childcare, prioritizing ESL students or ESL children for certain federal and state subsidized child development programs and services. Giving access to multilingual education. This is an important aspect, and so I think the senator's role is, he's done the work up in Sacramento to pass these laws and increase investment, and that work is not done. There, we can all agree that there's significant lack of funding, especially for after-school programs and expanding early child care access. But I think he wants to bring that tenure and experience into the county and improve efficiencies here.
That's fantastic. And you remind me, because this was a bit of a surprise to have you, which by the way was a pleasant surprise, I realized that we didn't appropriately introduce the candidate. So if I may, John, I'm going to back up just a little bit, just to give our audience a little bit of a bio context for Mr. Hertzberg. So Bob Hertzberg was first elected to the California State Assembly in 1996. He has served as both California State Assembly Speaker and the State Senate's Majority Leader. He has represented the San Fernando Valley in the state Senate since 2014. In between his time in the Assembly and in the state Senate, Hertzberg worked in the private sector as a clean energy entrepreneur. In addition to his public office, Hertzberg has served as the chair of the LA County Economic Development Corporation and on the boards of the USC Price School of Public Policy, the USC Schwarzenegger Institute for State and Global Policy, and the Pepperdine School of Public Policy. Hertzberg earned his law degree from the University of California, Hastings College of the Law, and he's a proud father of 2 grown sons. So I think it is important for us just to pause and introduce him to our audience. So with having said that, I'll go ahead and maybe ask our second question. And you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'll just ask it in case you're interested in going a little deeper. LA County has more 0 to 5-year-olds than the population of many US states. Can you tell us about the senator's experiences with early childhood issues, programs designed to support families with young children, and how his role in the county can strengthen supports during the most critical time of children's lives?
You made a really good point there about just the sheer size of LA County, how many children live here. That's the point that the senator has brought up many a time, because this seat for LA County isn't a local government seat. This isn't a typical city. This is very unique. LA County has a larger population than the state of Michigan. In District 3 alone, there's 2 million people. So it requires this experience of having to handle a lot of diverse communities, diverse backgrounds, diverse points of view, and knowing how to make bridges between those and make a deal to get something done. He spent his entire tenure, he was elected Speaker of the State Assembly with unanimous support, both Republican and Democratic support. That's never happened. And it's because he knows how to work with those communities. I know that's exactly why he's joining this race and wants to serve LA County, because he has the experience doing that. When he served in the Senate, he's served about 1 million people in just his Senate district. And so this is something he knows very well. He knows how to work with different communities and make things happen. And as majority leader of the state Senate, he has many excellent colleagues that have championed efforts to support early childhood education and childcare. And whenever there's an issue on a bill, when it comes to budget, when it comes to whether what's going to be the state payout, he's involved in that room. He's involved in discussions. He's making sure that bill is getting from point A to point B and getting signed by the governor. And that's the kind of experience he's going to bring into this LA County position. It's nothing new to him, and he's ready for the fight.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that, John. Next question. As the pandemic proved, early childhood workers are essential workers, but they face complex challenges. We know that nearly 49% of EC workers in the county come from households designated as low income, and 57% are rent burdened. More than half, and these are workers who largely are immigrant women of color, are on at least one form of public assistance. How can the county better support these workers, providing higher wages, more stable career paths, as well as more supports for those who run and own childcare programs in sustainable ways that we can all rely on? That was a long question. Happy to repeat it if you need me to.
It was a long question, but I got the point. And you make a lot of good points in that. I think it's important to recognize that in the state legislature, the legislature in the budget and an assembly bill, they passed legislation to allow for these frontline workers to have collective bargaining rights. That was something that was really missing from the conversation, and it wasn't being recognized. And I think that's an essential component of establishing, proper working rights, proper working conditions, things like, student to teacher ratios, childcare provider ratios. These are important things that are being talked about, and he's always been supportive of workers' rights. I think that increasing, I'm going to need you to repeat the question again. There's the second part, actually.
Yeah, no problem at all. So given that we know that a majority of the providers in this workforce are women of color, immigrant women of color, and are relying on public assistance, what would Mr. Hertzberg, what steps would he take to support increased compensation and improved pathways for this career?
I think step one is he's going to bring them in the room. I think that's the biggest thing that's been the problem, is they haven't been brought into the conversation to make the deal. He's a deal maker, brings them into the room. If these people are taking care of our children, and to be providing an essential function of our society and still having to rely on government assistance it's sad. That shouldn't be the case. And they're frontline workers. We've seen this conversation happen with healthcare workers and what it means for them to be making below a livable wage. And I think the same can be applied to childcare providers as well.
Yeah, thank you, John. Okay, so this is the final question. What's the one thing you want our audience to remember from this conversation, and why they should vote for Mr. Hertzberg?
I think the most important thing to remember about him is that he has a ton of experience fighting for excellent causes. This is a man I'm very proud to work for, because I don't see him back down on protecting workers' rights. I never see him back down on something that he believes in, and he's a man with integrity. He has served the state, both the Speaker of the Assembly and in the state Senate. He's got the experience of how to deal with a massive amount of people and get things done. There's so many cooks in the kitchen, if you will, and he knows how to make a good meal out of it. I see how important it is for his daughter to grow up in a wonderful place where she can grow up safe, she can get a quality education. And I know he believes every single person should have access to that. It should be guaranteed. This is a man who's going to bring everyone into the room. Doesn't matter the difference of opinion. He's going to bring them in the room, have a conversation, because with something as important as early childcare and early childhood education, most people are in agreement, but we find little things to disagree on, and nothing gets done, or it happens too slow. And these are kids where their cognitive development is rapidly changing, and we can't be slow on that. Bob Hertzberg's going to get it done. He has experience. He's done it in the state, and he's ready to implement it in the county.
Yeah, perfect. And yes, and as we would say, you're only that in that time frame of 0 to 3. You only live that once. We only get one shot at getting it right. And so thank you so much, John, for spending some time with us, sharing a little bit about the senator's commitments around early care and education, and what he would do to support early care and education and children or families with children if elected to District 3. We appreciate your time, and thank you, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, John. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you, Sonia, for doing a little juggling there. Want to thank our ended up being 3+ candidates. So thank you to Maria Brenes, Rocio Rivas, Lindsey Horvath, and then I hope JP gets some hazard pay from the senator for coming on, but we appreciate them doing a little juggling there. Hopefully that demonstrates the importance of our issues and our community. Want to thank everybody for being with us here today. We will be posting this on YouTube later, so that there will, I think a link will go out so that you can then share it with others in your networks. We want to get the the word out, educate both the candidates as well as community members about our issues, and hope that this can be part of doing that. So thank you all. Again, be well and take care, everybody.